For years, Hollywood has inspired us to live life to the fullest, pursue our dreams, and even fall in love. But what happens when what we watch taps into the darker side of human nature? In this video, we'll explore the chilling stories of people whose crimes were fueled by what they watched. Murders that put even the goriest slashers to shame. From wannabe vigilantes to supervillains come to life, here are the killers inspired by TV. The Purge franchise has been popular for years because it poses the very basic question: what would you do if crime were legal for 12 hours? It's a harrowing thought, but even fans would be shocked by the actions of Johnathan Cruz. In 2016, the killer began talking to his friends about purging. Despite being the father to a 3-month-old baby, he wanted to commit violence similar to those in the movie. In one text message, the violent movie enthusiast said, "I purge every night now. Since I'm dying, someone else has to." And unlike the movie, the crimes the 19-year-old would commit were very real. It all began in the early hours of May 12th, when the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department discovered the body of 54-year-old Billy Boyd. He had been shot twice in the head and left on the sidewalk. It was a mystery. Billy was known to be a family man with several grandchildren and wasn't involved in any crime. Why would anyone want to kill him? The police barely had time to contemplate the killing when Johnathan struck again. A few hours later, he murdered Jay Higginbotham, who police believe was trying to run away from this attacker when he was gunned down. In both instances, Johnathan had help from a getaway driver, Elijah Brooks, who took a cut of whatever money was made. After these two killings, the 19-year-old allegedly told one of his girlfriends that he needed to leave town ASAP. And Johnathan responded to an earlier message from his mom asking what he was doing that day with a screenshot. It was of a news story covering the murders, and told her to delete it after she read it. Characters in The Purge often brag about their temporarily legal crimes, and it seems this killer was doing the same. Amazingly, his mother didn't react negatively. Even though her son had just admitted to being a murderer, her only response was that the police could still find the information on his phone. Not to worry, the 19-year-old said. He would simply get a new one. But Johnathan racked up a few more crimes before he could make a great escape, starting with a robbery. 2 days after the brutal murders, the new father and 18-year-old Stephen Clark mugged a man. They stole the victim's money and cell phones before pistol whipping him and running away. Still, the now robber and murderer wasn't satisfied. Later the same day, he went to a local Wendy's to meet a teenage girl he'd been supplying drugs to. The meeting didn't go all that well, and at that point, the girl tried to walk out on him. The Purge enthusiast would not let her leave and threatened her with a gun. It could have easily become his third murder, but the manager of Wendy's confronted them in the parking lot. The girl got away while Johnathan was distracted. Not one to let the matter go, the attacker followed her to his friend's place, where she was hiding out. The 19-year-old didn't kill her, but tried to show her the video footage of him murdering Jay Higginbotham. Just like with his mother, he needed other people to know about the crimes he was committing. On May 16, 2016, Johnathan committed his third and final murder of Jose Ruiz, a local man who was sitting in the driver's seat of his Pontiac car. Detectives noticed that it was the same MO as the last two killings: random victims with no clear motivation. While the police were looking into the case and trying to find their suspect, he would be delivered to them in an unexpected way. Johnathan Cruz was arrested, not for the murders initially, but for publicly threatening the unnamed teenage girl in the Wendy's days before. But once the authorities began looking into the teenager's background, it was clear they had their man. There were several photos of him throwing up gang signs, waving around firearms, and hinting at an affiliation with the Bloods gang. Some of these were even taken on the day that he and Stephen Clark robbed a man at gunpoint. As the 19-year-old's crimes were reported, both the police and the public wanted to know why. Why would a new father ruin his life by going out to kill people, especially random strangers who hadn't done anything to him? Soon, reports from the witnesses began to paint a grim picture of his mindset, telling the police that Johnathan had bragged about his crimes by saying he was purging. Characters in The Purge refer to the crimes they carry out as purging themselves of all their pent-up emotions. In the Purge universe, the crimes don't have to have a rhyme or reason. They're done just because. This was Jonathan's mindset towards his actions, and this only made law enforcement less sympathetic to him. Prosecutor Terry Curry said that his crimes were 100% random, and given what the 19-year-old had done, they would be seeking the death penalty. Amazingly, during the initial hearing in June 2016, the 19-year-old entered a not guilty plea on 3 murder counts. Besides this plea, he also had support from his loved ones, who pushed back against his alleged association with the violent Purge movies. His girlfriend, Angela Barger, said the prosecutors and the public misunderstood him.
They're making him out to be like he's some type of crazy, violent person, and he's not. He has a 3-month-old daughter, and yeah, he had issues, but he wasn't that violent.
While the new dad was locked up, he also made an effort to garner sympathy from the public, handing over his Facebook page to a friend. He told them to change his profile picture to him and his daughter and to let people comment on it. The killer would celebrate his 20th birthday while facing charges of murder, attempted robbery, armed robbery, and criminal gang enhancement. His trial began in May 2017, a year after he went on a murder spree. By this point, prosecutors abandoned their pursuit of the death penalty, and Johnathan had changed his plea to guilty. For his crimes, the now 20-year-old was handed 3 consecutive life sentences. His accomplice, Stephen Clark, was sentenced to 16 years for his role in the robbery. Elijah Brooks was also charged with 2 counts of felony murder for his role in the killing of Billy Boyd and Jay Higginbotham. When it comes to horror movies, Freddy Krueger has some of the most kills of any fictional character. This kill count goes even higher when you consider the real-life murders that have been attributed to him, including those from Daniel Gonzalez. This killer had been dealing with mental health struggles for a long time. He was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic in 1998, and things got so bad for the 26-year-old that he spent 6 months at the Oak Tree Clinic in Knapp, a mental institution. But rather than the young man getting better, he went off his medication and began to decline even more. Daniel, who was from Surrey in the United Kingdom, reportedly started hearing voices in his head, and the things they told him to do were violent. The Brit specifically set out to kill 10 people, and some experts have suggested that this obsession came from his life situation. As of 2004, he was unemployed, living with his mom, had no friends or romantic partners, and spent all his time on his computer. The young man's obsession with media, especially the Nightmare on Elm films, may have begun when he felt isolated from the rest of society. The reclusive 26-year-old went to a rave where he ingested a cocktail of drugs, including speed, ecstasy, cocaine, and ketamine. The next day, he grabbed a kitchen knife and went to Portsmouth, where he attacked a couple and tried to harm them with a knife but was fought off. Not to be deterred, he tried again later that day and ended up killing Marie Harding, a 73-year-old ticket seller in West Sussex. In a note to himself, he would describe the killing as one of the best things I've done in my life. Daniel was also known to have written notes referring to himself as Zippy, a twisted alter ego. After idolizing Freddy Krueger through a screen, he'd finally become closer to his hero by taking a life, and soon he would go out for more. The troubled young man spent most of September 16th drinking, and then took a bus to Tottenham to find another victim. Sadly, he would end up killing 46-year-old landlord Kevin Malloy in the early hours of the next day. He would later tell the police, "I had to do it, because I wouldn't be able to have been satisfying myself otherwise. The voice in my head was just really bad at that time, you know?" Both murders had been random street stabbings, and Daniel decided it was time to switch up his M.O. He broke into a nearby house where a couple in their 50s, Christina and Kumi Constantinou, were sleeping. He tried to make them his next victims, but Kumi punched him while his wife screamed for help. To avoid getting caught, the 26-year-old killer ran off, but decided to try other houses. He randomly rang on people's doorbells, hoping someone would let him in. The unlucky pair was 75-year-old retired pediatrician Derek Robinson and his 68-year-old wife, Jean. Being an older couple, they would have found it harder to fight the young man off. When their decorator came over to the house a while later, he discovered their cold, dead bodies. As if discovering the bodies of his clients wasn't traumatizing enough, he also saw the killer naked and covered in their blood. The unnamed decorator called the police, who caught the man responsible that same day. Daniel later said he wanted to know what it would be like to be Freddy Krueger for a day. Freddy is the main antagonist in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise and is essentially the vengeful spirit of a child killer who was murdered by the parents of his victims. He haunts people's dreams and kills them in both the land of slumber and the real world. This killer was looking to become as famous as Freddy by doing the latter. But, unlike Freddy, his victims weren't people he had a personal gripe with. They were strangers he murdered for seemingly no reason. In March 2006, his trial began. And one thing the press noted was that he showed no remorse, even as the details of his crimes were read out in court. He denied the 4 murders, but admitted that he'd tried to kill 2 people. His defense, however, said that these charges should be downgraded to manslaughter. The way they explained, the 26-year-old was deeply mentally disturbed and had been following the voices in his head. The prosecution agreed that he had a personality disorder, but wouldn't admit that it was a mental illness. In contrast, a doctor instead said that the reclusive man had schizophrenia, and it had been made worse by drug use. Psychiatric consultant Edward Petch recalled the young man had tried to bite himself to death, and that he had been accompanied by police officers in riot gear. Even the authorities seemed nervous about what the voices might tell him to do next. But, voices in his head or not, the jury decided in about 90 minutes. Guilty of murder. When the judge declared that he would be given 6 consecutive life sentences to be served at a maximum security hospital, a relative of one of his victims clapped. After being handed this lengthy sentence, Daniel's team tried to have his jail term reduced, but a judge rejected it. The reason for this has been speculated to be concerned about his motivations. The fact that he had such a serious mental condition that was left untreated and wanted to become as famous as a fictional murderer called into question whether reducing his sentence would be smart. With that, the reclusive young man found himself as hated by his community as Freddy Krueger. And just like his Nightmare on Elm Street hero, the 26-year-old would also cross to the other side. In 2007, a little over a year after he committed his gruesome crimes in search of the fame, the 26-year-old died at Broadmoor Hospital. Nurses initially came into his room after he had not collected his medication for the day and found him unconscious from a severe arm wound. They couldn't save him. In the years following his death, an inquiry was launched that determined that while his potential for violence wasn't overlooked, he wasn't treated successfully. It might have been this lack of successful treatment that saw a horror movie-loving young man take the lives of several innocent people. But Daniel would only be one in a long list of people who turned to the media to escape their reality and harmed others to feel closer to the fictional monsters they idolized. Before you go, I'd love to know if you like having multiple stories in one video. Let me know in the comments down below. And if there are any cases you'd like for me to cover, you can email them to me using the address on my channel. Thank you.